All right, welcome to our next plant podcast. We're going to call this 45B, primarily due to some misnumbering that I've gotten myself into. But anyway, I want you to, we just did plant anatomy. And that's kind of very much related to plant growth because plants are not like us. Okay? Plants are we grow all over our bodies, throughout our bodies as we're growing. Different tissues grow at different rates, but as we are growing up, we grow all over. Plants don't do that. Plants grow, if this is my, hold on. Sheesh. You don't know how many times I've had to redo this already. I don't know what's wrong with me. Alright, so here is a shoot coming up out of the ground, and this is the root going down into the ground. Okay? This plant does not grow all over its body like we do. It grows only here at the shoot tip and at the root tip. That's it. The type of tissue there that is going through mitosis, so we're making lots of new cells. It is called meristem tissue or meristematic tissue. It is where the growth or the mitosis is occurring. It does not occur here or here, only here and here. Okay? There's a better picture here of meristem tissue. You can see that it exists, it's shaded in blue, at every tip of every root and every tip of every shoot. Okay, meristem tissue that is perpetual embryonic tissue here, meaning it is not committed to a job. The cells in this tissue could grow up to be anything. They could grow up to be epidermis. They could grow up to be vascular tissue in this plant. Whatever. They are not committed. They are very generalized cells at this point. So the apical shoot meristem, the apical in this sense means tip. Sometimes we think of the apex as meaning the top, but for now understand that this is referring to tips of shoots, tips of roots. They both allow the plant to grow tall, to grow long, up high and down into the soil, and this type of growth in length is called primary growth. Primary growth, growth in length up and down the plant. Now, there are regions of meristematic tissue in some plants that allow a plant not just to grow high but to grow wide, and these are called lateral meristems because we're going to grow to the side. Okay, this type of growth is called secondary growth. And you can see here, if we cut our plant across and looked, we would see a ring, because this occurs in basically a cylinder going through the body of the plant, a ring of meristem that would allow this plant to grow in width. Okay, so this is what apical meristems look like under the microscope. We talked about this one extensively. This is the classic onion root tip. This is the meristematic region in this part of the onion root tip. This is it in the shoot tip, but mostly in biology we talk about root tips, I guess, because they're easier to see and to get. So this is a diagram that's worth knowing. We've cut off the tip of an onion root. Exactly, if you remember the mitosis lab, it was called Lab 3 Mitosis, where we went online and looked at the different cells and different stages of mitosis. We were looking in the tip of an onion root, in this part right here, in the meristem. The diagram is showing you, here is the meristem tissue, there it is in the diagram. It's called the zone of cell division. It's where the growth is occurring. Now, that part is living, it's very tender, very sensitive tissue. This part is not. This part is essentially dead tissue. It's called the root cap, and it is there primarily to protect this very sensitive tissue as the root bores down into the soil. Just above the zone of cell division, you have this region here called the zone of elongation. as you can see, when the cells are just formed, they're just little tiny, almost like cubes, but up here the cells are much longer. This is where that happens, the zone of elongation. The cells grow a little bit in length. And finally, up here, the cells have fully matured. They have committed to being either epidermis or vascular tissue or ground tissue or whatever it is they're going to be. They've committed. They are mature. This is the zone of maturation. It's up here that you start to see root hairs, because the epidermal cells have finally matured and committed to becoming epidermis and to becoming root hairs or whatever. Down here they haven't grown up yet. They still are kind of generalized. Okay, so it probably would be worth it to you to know what these three regions represent, and so on. Okay. Shoot growth, we don't really need to, if you know about roots growing, you know enough. All right. We've already talked about all of this. Now, there are two types of lateral meristem that would encircle in a like a tree in the trunk, that would encircle that trunk. One is called vascular cambium. Cambium is just talking about a type of meristem tissue that occurs around a tree as opposed to just at the tips. Vascular cambium, and there's another type called cork cambium. This type simply makes bark. This type makes phloem and xylem. Okay, now what we're going to do is look at, let's see, is there anything on here we haven't already talked about? No, we've already talked about that. Now what I want to show you is this diagram. We're going to talk about growth rings and why you can determine the age of a tree. When you slice through it and you look at its trunk, you can determine how old that tree was. Here's why. The vascular cambium is right here where I'm drawing this red line. It makes a circle all the way around the tree trunk. There's cork cambium as well. We're going to ignore that for right now. The vascular cambium produces xylem cells in this direction. It produces phloem cells in this direction. It produces xylem cells going in this direction. So it's producing two types of cells and kind of they're growing away from the center. Okay, now if this is my vascular cambium, let's say we're starting in the spring, and so springtime, there's lots of water, there's lots of sunlight, we can have very vigorous growth. So the cells that my vascular cambium produces, and I'm talking about xylem cells right now because that's where the growth rings occur, they grow really, really, really big. Okay. Now, as the season progresses though, and we come to fall and winter, let's look at my cambium again, and growth has been occurring all summer. So these were the cells that I started with over here. Now, but as we went to fall and winter, less growth occurs. So the cells that are produced here are much smaller. And you can see that these are much smaller, so these would have been produced during winter, fall, when there's not much opportunity for growth. This would be spring and summer growth here. Okay, now the plant, let's say we come back around to spring and fall, spring and summer again. So here's my big cells from the previous year that I drew over here. Here's my big cells from that I drew over here. Here's the little cells from the fall and the winter, and now we're at a new spring season. I'm growing big cells again. Now what you can see is I'm getting a pattern, and that's exactly what we see here. This is the mark of the marcation. This is 1 year's growth from here to here, spring to fall and winter. The big cells indicate one part of the year, the little cells indicate the next part of the year. So if we alright, So let's get our labels. So xylem is being produced inside, so that's what we're looking at. Phloem is produced to the outside and actually eventually gets kind of sloughed off, so it has to be constantly made new. So this here would be the cork cambium right there, and that's producing bark to the outside. Again, the bark can get worn away, so we have to constantly be producing new. So let's look at this. How old is this tree? How old would you think? Okay, so this is the vascular cambium, okay, and we can clearly see there's little cells, big cells, and then we've got little cells, big cells. So how old do you think it is? Looks to me like we've got 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of growth. Okay? Now, if you wanted to kill a tree, all you have to do is rip off that cambium, because you're going to destroy the vascular tissue, and this plant would have no way to transport stuff up and down. Even though you haven't chopped it down, you've just stripped off the vascular cambium that is around the perimeter of the plant. This is a pretty clear diagram showing you the cork or the bark. Cork cambium would be right on the inside, the phloem, the vascular cambium, and then the many, many layers of accumulating xylem. Okay? Alright, now, this carving, where will it be in 50 years? Is it going to be up because the tree is growing up? No. It will be here, because where does the growth occur? It occurs out here at the tips of the shoots and down under the ground in the tips of the roots. So if you carve your initials in the tree, they will always be at the height where you carve them. Now, they might get stretched out because the tree is growing in width, but they will still be at the same height. Now, we need to talk about plant hormones if we're talking about plant growth, because plant hormones cause plants to grow in particular ways. I do want to remind you, if we are going to talk about plant hormones, I want to remind you of a couple of slides that I showed you a long time ago when we were talking about animal hormones. You need to remember slides like this in general. Remember about hormones that can enter cells or cannot enter cells. Protein hormones get lodged in a receptor, they bind to it, they cause the G protein to become activated and all that, which causes a chain reaction. The CAMP is a secondary messenger and all that. That's useful to remember. Hormones work in similar ways. They are signals that are sent from one part of a body to another part and cause a response. The signal transduction pathway, we talked about that. Okay? You also should remember that it's an amplified response in many cases. So hormones amplify responses to things, so it takes just a very small signal to cause a big reaction. Okay? So those are some things we don't want to forget, even though we talked about them a long time ago. We're talking about them again now as we talk about plant hormones. Okay? Sorry. And show, that's what I want to do. And discard. Alright, going back to our plant hormone. Okay. There are 5 hormones that you ought to be able to recognize. They are in order, I don't even know if they're in order of importance except for the top one. Auxin is the most important one. It is also referred to as IAA. So if you see that, it's the same as this. Don't let it fool you. Gibberellins are another group of plant hormones. Abscisic acid, also sometimes referred to as ABA. Ethylene, and cytokinins. Okay, these are all extraordinarily important plant hormones. Now, auxin, it's in charge of a behavior we see in plants called tropism, which is basically growing towards growing towards or away from a stimulus. Okay? We most often talk about phototropism. You know, if you put a plant in a window, it's going to grow towards the light. Okay? Well, if this is my tip of my plant, okay, auxin is made in the tip, and normally it is passed down from cell to cell down the plant, and the plant grows equally on both sides. But if we shine a light from one side, light inhibits auxin production on the side that is getting struck by light. So this side would not be getting auxin. This side would be. This side would be experiencing growth. In fact, the cells would be elongating. They'd be getting slightly bigger at a faster rate, and that would cause the plant ultimately to bend towards that light source, because this side would grow faster than this side. It's a pretty elegant little mechanism, really. So the asymmetrical, unequal distribution of auxin leads to that growth towards light. Dark side elongates faster. Okay? Geotropism is another tropism. Growth in response to gravity. It's how a stem knows to go up and a root knows to go down. Auxin controls that as well. Thigmotropism is growth in response to touch. If I have a post here and a little vine plant next to it, the little tendrils of the vine will ultimately sense that post, and begin to grow around it in order to pull the plant leaves up towards sunlight. Okay. All right. Gibberellins, there's bunches of them. Their effects are mainly to make stems long, like for example when you see a dandelion apparently arise overnight. Gibberellins cause that flower stem to grow very rapidly, so the bloom gets up and exposed to the pollinators, whatever they may be, very quickly. It also causes fruit to grow. And if you can see, people producing fruits have learned to use gibberellin to make very unnaturally large grapes. These are normal grapes. You treat them with gibberellin and they get ginormous. It also has something to do with seed germination. Don't worry about that. You can associate it with these two things. I think you'll be good. Abscisic acid will slow growth down, and importantly, I would like you to know this one, seed dormancy. Seeds have in them a lot of abscisic acid, and it's preventing them from germinating. It is forcing the seed to be dormant. How then does the seed sprout? Well, it will sprout when there is enough water present to wash away the abscisic acid that is in the seed. So once the water is present, which is a cue that, hey, this is a good condition for growth, the abscisic acid is washed away and the seed will sprout or germinate. Okay? That's pretty clever, elegant little design too. Okay? Ethylene. Ethylene is the only hormone that is a gas. It's the only one. And plant cells will release it, and its effects are to cause fruit to ripen. If you want bananas to ripen, if you put them in a bag and close up the bag, if one is ripening at a little faster rate than the others, it'll produce ethylene, which will encourage the others to begin to ripen as well. Ethylene can also have a role in leaf drop, apoptosis, cell death, programmed cell death, making the leaves drop off of the trees and so on. So this is why that saying, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. If you have a rotten apple in with a bunch of other apples, it'll be producing tons of ethylene, which will encourage the other apples to ripen faster than they normally would. Okay? Here's a neat little thing to think about. Fruit ripening is an adaptation. It's when the seeds aren't yet ready, the fruit's not very appetizing. It's tart, it's sour, and that means herbivores don't want to eat it. But when the seeds are ready, the fruit is much sweeter and encourages the animals to eat it when the time is right. Again, really elegant, nice little solutions to these problems. Okay. Okay, this is also a nice reminder. We talked at the beginning of the year about negative and positive feedback, and the only other place we've talked about positive feedback is in the human hormone oxytocin, which encourages labor, and the more if you have oxytocin, you encourage labor. If you have labor, you encourage oxytocin. That encourages more labor, that encourages more oxytocin, and it's this escalating thing until you're done. Ethylene works the same way. The more ethylene, the more ripening, the more ripening, the more ethylene. So it's a positive feedback. I don't think we need to talk about that. Turgor movements are in plants. Remember, turgor pressure, a plant cell fills with water, and it's turgid, it's upright, it's full of water, flaccid, it doesn't have much water, it's collapsing and all of that. Well, rapid movements of water into and out of cells can cause some fairly rapid movements in plants. Like, for example, the Venus flytrap is able to go like that due to very rapid movement of water out of cells or into cells that at the hinge point of the little leaves. Photoperiodism. You should at least know what this is. It is response to the changes of the season. And plants know what season it is because they measure day length. They have certain chemicals called, let me give you the name of the chemical, called phytochromes in them that actually are altered when presented with sunlight, and then when presented dark they alter back to their original form. And so by measuring how much sunlight and darkness exists, plants can determine when they should bloom, when they should not bloom, things like that. That's called photoperiodism. We could go on and on about that, but I think we better just cut it. All right, that's that. I hope you didn't fall asleep. I'll talk to you later. Catch you in the next podcast.